Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Yes, I am pulling bindweed off the fence and from beneath this hornbeam. So the roots are not competing. And as sad as it sounds, I really enjoy it. Especially if you've got pernicious weeds, you know, just to be able to go out little and often, I think, is the key. So, that's enough of that for the moment. If I'm honest with you, this is not going to be the most colourful Gardener's World you have ever seen. The reason is we moved in October. First of all, it was understanding the space, then designing it, and then starting the building, the paths, the terraces. Then over the winter, very much the hedges and the trees. It's all about early days, getting the soil right and the structure of the garden. But I will promise you one thing. There is plenty for us to get on with. And on that note, we best crack on. So, before we get on with the first job, be an idea, I think, just to sort of give you a bit of a recap. Ultimately, I've got 4 gardens. This first one being, let's call it the family garden. So nice big lawn, deep borders, terrace area, pathway down one side, places to pause and sit. Then you go down a level, but that'll be divided. There'll be a hedge across there, down a couple of steps, into what I'm going to call my sort of fruit and herb garden. At the back, there'll sit this greenhouse, then another hedge, and then down another couple of steps. And then you'll go into a species rose, a few magnolias, and a lot of sort of perennial planting with a big circular pool in the middle, which will probably just be full of lilies. So that'll be a really romantic space. And then after that, another hedge across just to divide the space. And you'll go through to an area that's got my shepherd's hut, which I inherited, and an outside kitchen down there, 2 sort of large sort of deck areas, somewhere to entertain, relax. It sounds good, doesn't it? Only thing is, I've now got to get on with it and make it happen. You might remember, back in spring, I was prepping this border. I've since then kept it free of weeds, but also I put the canes in where the shrubs were going to go. I'd normally wait until the autumn, but I'm itching to get some in the border, so I'm going to pop in just 3 today. So I think the first thing to say is when I'm buying these plants, I'm not necessarily thinking about them as plants. I know that might sound strange, but it's about shapes, forms, how they connect with what's around them. If you imagine this viburnum, it's going to grow probably to about 3 metres. I'm going to lift the canopy, so I'm going to prune all those lower stems. So you're going to see those, they'll be exposed. You've got a spring flower and you've got a real leathery leaf. And then next to it, this is a good old dogwood, so Cornus sibirica. Quite relaxed in its growth. When I said spring flower, and think about it, fantastic winter stems, but also good autumn colour and a little flower. So you're starting then to join these sort of ornamental interests together. Then as we move down the border, you come to the Amelanchier, multi-stemmed, really domed, you know, flower, berry, autumn colour. Now we get to the Cotinus cogrea flamissio. The smoke bush are amazing plants, quite mounded in its habit. This beautiful sort of dark leaf with this smoky flower. It gives a pop of colour to the shrubs in the border. But again, you can just see the 2 leaves together, you know? So that will go in there. Now, last but not least, this is ribes, so ornamental currant. It's called Ribes Oregon Snowflake. It gets up to about 1.5 metres. But in my head, I'm going to sort of keep it slightly really in a dome. that will sit under the corners. Mass, multi-stemmed, beautiful bark as it gets older, winter flower, followed by a berry, even pretty good autumn colour. So you can see that all the time, all I'm doing is a little jigsaw and I'm putting it together. So, let's get it in. I'm not going to put any manure in the bottom because I've already prepped the soil earlier in the spring. The next thing I am going to do, though, is really soak this hole. But there we go, that's sitting in there nicely. And then as I take the shrub out, you just start to break that up. It's not bad at all, it's quite fine. There's lots of white root in there, which is ultimately what we want. I'm gently teasing the roots apart to encourage them to grow into the soil. And now I'm just going to push that soil back around. What I've done by watering that hole before is create myself a bit of a sump. By creating that sump, our water's going to sit in there, you know, which will benefit that plant hugely. When it does come to watering this time of year, what I would say is, rather than little and often, things like trees and shrubs, they're better off having a good soaking, you know, every 2 or 3 days. There we go. Slowly, slowly, it will come together. Well, I'll get the other 2 shrubs in the ground. Jamie went to West End Gardens in Chichester to enjoy some summer colour.
In early summer, so many flowers are singing. The sweet peas climbing skywards, loving the mist. Salvias full of bees.
There is that, a classic bloom for cottage gardens and borders alike that will add height, theatre, and a variety of colour. They can be tricky to grow, and they can be spectacular.
Chantal Sparrow is the deputy head gardener who looks after one very special display.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. They're incredible. My goodness. It's not often I'm lost for words, but they're staggeringly beautiful. I have delphinium envy right now.
This amazing array of Delphinium alatum. There's 35 varieties here, given to the garden 5 years ago, with the aim of testing them out, learning about how they grow best, and showcasing their blooms.
Chantal, why alatum? And why so many alatums?
Well, other than the sheer beauty, they're more perennial than a lot of other delphiniums. And they're available in so many different colours.
Well, you can see this sort of vast array of different shades.
And their sheer size, you don't get any quite as high as alatums.
They're the biggest delphiniums I think I've ever seen. Is that specific to the alatum group, that they're more branching and clump forming and almost multi-stem?
Just huge multi-stem plants, yeah.
Alatum is a species that originates from the chilly alpine meadows of Europe and Asia, which is why they're more perennial here in our winters. They've been hybridized hugely over the last 400 years. But, like most delphiniums, they're still tricky, or fussy, or both.
You've clearly got the magic touch when it comes to delphiniums. These are magnificent. What have you learnt in growing these?
Well, the first and foremost, they really like their own space, make a real feature of them in a bed of their own. They don't want that root competition from other plants, which can also lead to great hiding spaces for slugs.
I've always put them in amongst roses and dahlias, that sort of typical cottage, country garden sort of vibe.
No, that's when they don't tend to thrive so well.
So they want to be by themselves?
They want to be by themselves.
And what about the soil?
They really need free draining.
Right.
They really don't like having their feet wet. That's their biggest killer.
And then the third thing that always happens with mine, which I guess might be because they're in a mixed border with bad drainage, is mildew.
Yeah, very common. You really want that good air circulation around the plants.
Space is critical.
Space, they really need
That's
a big
the most important
space.
thing. And then in terms of deadheading, do you cut these down at all?
We deadhead them, and then when they finish flowering, we'll cut them right down to the ground.
But they'll reshoot?
They'll reshoot, they'll be reinvigorated, give them a bit of blood, fish and bone, and they'll re-emerge with another wonderful display, if not as tall.
That's brilliant.
It is wonderful.
In the winter, do you lift and divide them? Do you propagate
We're going to
them?
be lifting and dividing them this autumn, so extra plants, and that'll just increase their vigour again as well.
Can I come back when you do that?
Please
Because
do.
then I can fill my garden up with all those spare
That's it,
delphiniums.
yeah.
Thank you.
Chantel has also been taking basil cuttings, which involves removing a section of the stem and the woody crown. These were done in the spring and have developed into healthy new plants, and some are even flowering just 3 months later.
The luxury of having so many different cultivars of delphiniums all growing side by side means I can work my way through and choose which ones are my favourites, which is really difficult when they're all this magnificent. But this one has really caught my eye. This is called Rosemary Brock, and it's this lovely, dusky, soft, romantic pink. I'm a huge fan of this sort of colour, but also, as you've probably noticed, it rained a lot through the night, and so some of the delphiniums here have started to flop in the rain, but this one has stayed fully upright. And these buds that haven't quite opened yet, they're like little pearls of joy that are waiting to unfurl. And the way these water droplets are just dangling off them are like little icicles. I think these are as beautiful, if not more so, than the flowers themselves. This is one that I'd definitely have in my own garden. This delphinium is striking, but in a very different way. It's regal, it's velvety, it's sort of rich and royal, and using deep, dark, bold colours like this in a flower border or in a container or even alongside other delphiniums like this adds real depth into a border. We had 33 millimetres of rain last night, and even so, they're still standing erect and tall and proud. Just go along and shake the droplets off them, like you would do sort of picking apples off an apple tree. It takes the weight off the branches, it alleviates them of that weight pressure and makes sure they won't flop. Not that this one is. There are not many plants in the garden that are blue anyway, but this blue. These are electric blue. This is more of an azure. This is a sky blue. This one's called Blue Dawn. I think this one's one of my favourites. It would add a zing to any border. It's uplifting, it's joyful, it's smile-inducing. And it's not just this brilliant, beautiful blue that's so special about this delphinium. It's the size of it. These delphiniums tower well above me. They're huge, they're vast. The other really clever thing about this plant in particular, each stem, as it comes up, actually then also breaks again into all these separate side shoots of flowers. So as the main flower finishes and fades away, you've got all these other buds and flower stems waiting in the wings. This is going to give you weeks, if not months, of enjoyment. I challenge anybody to walk through this bed of delphiniums and not just feel inspired and happy and joyful. They're just fountains of happiness. And what Chantel's done here has not just infused and excited and sort of reignited my passion for delphiniums, but she's shown me how to grow them properly, which is something I've never been able to do. I'm on really heavy clay, and I now know I need to build a little raised bed to give them really good drainage, but more so, put them centre of attention, make them the main feature in the garden, give them plenty of space, and then hopefully I'll also be rewarded with something this beautiful.
One day, I might possibly be able to get delphiniums as beautiful as that. My offering at the moment are those which are literally 2 Delphinium recuenii, which is a biannual that I grew in the other garden, have rocked up here in a plant that I brought with me. On the bright side, I can collect the seed, and maybe next year I'll be in a place where I can actually sow them. But as we've already worked out, I've got an awful lot of building to do. So here, which is going to be a gravel path, bricks either side, is going to run down to some steps and then drop away into that lower garden. This is quite simple as far as the actual construction process. So if I come down, you imagine straight away I've got a path, it's sloping. So I've got a fixed point at the top there, fixed point right down there where I meet the step. So I've squared everything off the house, and then I've run a string line really tight from point A down ultimately to point B. So when you're excavating, you're working out your levels, you've got to allow for that sub base, or let's call it hardcore. I've allowed about 100 mil there. Then you've got your mortar bed that your brick's going to sit on. That I've allowed about 30, 40 mil. And then I sit my brick on top, which is about another 50 mil. So if you add all those together, you know, you're not very shy of about 200 mil. So once you've dug it out, taken it away, then you start fill back in. So the hardcore goes in first, then you compact that, and then you're ready to start your building. When it comes to edging any path, you could do it in sort of timber, steel edgings. I've chosen a brick. You know, there's lots of different options. Although this is a clay brick, it is a paving brick. So a lot of the bricks that we build our houses with, they can't use them on the ground in the gardens, because what will happen is they suck up too much moisture, and then in the winter, if the frost comes, they'll blow the surface of them. With these have actually been what we call fired to a temperature that will deal with the cold conditions. And now if we sort of talk about the mortar mix, this is 1 part cement and then 6 parts sharp sand. So all I'm doing now really is laying myself the mortar underneath, working that down with my trowel, and then I'm just going to offer my bricks in, and I'm working to my line. So nice, simple and level. And then what we do is, as we're working down, we're sort of haunching as we go. That's going to hold the brick to stop it moving. So it really is that simple. So I will top this up, probably with a bit more sand, and leave about 30, 40 mil for my gravel finish. But I will not do that to really the last sort of knockings, when the garden's getting to the point where, you know, I'm not bringing in dirty wheelbarrows and lots of mud on my feet, you know, because I don't want my gravel being ruined. So the next thing really, finish the pathway, sand through, and then I can prep the beds, finish off. Now, we're off to Norfolk to meet Rajal Shah, who has put a modern twist on a cottage garden.
I describe my garden as light and airy, filled with plants that dance. Delicate, wafty grasses, succulents. Tumbled together, they make for quite a charming, cottagey look. Putting a plant in the ground and watching it thrive and flower is just so special. It's been like medicine for me. My name's Rajal, and this is my contemporary cottage garden in Norwich. A lot of the plants that I think of as traditional cottage garden plants won't necessarily thrive here. We have very sandy soil and it gets very dry very quickly. I have never, ever had a squidgy lawn or puddles, doesn't matter how heavy it rains. So I've had to choose plants that cope with that. So this is the big south-facing border, the hottest, driest, toughest part of the garden here. I wanted a great depth of border to really have an impact, and so I can have plants coming into their own through the year. The ones that will thrive here are drought tolerant. They can cope with this very dry, sandy soil. So there's Verbena bonariensis, there's Gowras, Agapanthus, and back here is a really special plant called Althea cannabina, which is in the mallow family. If you like hollyhocks but can't grow them, it's the same flower shape but much more delicate and pretty. So I'm picturing a sea of pink airy flowers all around me. Lots of cottage gardens can start to feel quite tired and faded at this time of year. So I think foliage is really important, particularly when flowers are a little scarce. So lovely shiny foliage from something like this Pittosporum tenuifolium golf ball, the coloured foliage from the beautiful Sambucus. I moved here back in 2012 with my husband. Both the children were under 3, and it was pretty hard. Gradually, I just got more and more stressed and tired, and my self-esteem went down, 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 down. I felt I wasn't good at being a mum. And in the end, I did leave my job and was finally diagnosed with postnatal depression. When I was at my lowest, I couldn't face going out. But the garden was safe. I could still be outside. As I started to feel a bit more functional, the garden became a refuge. And I just started picking away at it, planting things. I think the physical element of gardening was a big factor in my recovery. Seeing things grow and getting those wonderful rewards for your efforts was something I could do and feel safe doing. You just get immersed in this world of sounds and smells and sights and textures. Your mind is just focused on that. In a way, it was like I was prescribing myself gardening. I'm always looking for spaces where I can squeeze more in, hence it being quite cottagey. I want it full of life. It thrills me when there are butterflies and bees and dragonflies and other weird and wonderful creatures around. So the way I've made the garden more contemporary is by having these linking elements. I've used repeating materials or structures to connect the garden. Behind me, it's this ROMS steel reinforcement, which is used to reinforce concrete, and it goes naturally rusty, so you get this beautiful colour and texture behind the plants. The shape is ideal for screens and climbers. This is Trachelospermum. It's an evergreen climber that twines. The most wonderful fragrance when it's in full flower, and will eventually screen the greenhouse beautifully. I couldn't be more grateful to have found gardening in my life. The garden gave me a chance to experience success and things going right when everything else in my life was going wrong. And it continues to heal me whenever I need it.
Rachel, I think using that word, safe, you know, a garden being a safe place, I think so many people are going to resonate with your story. Look, just sort of creating a little courtyard for the time being with a lot of the containers that I bought from the other house. So yes, we have some colour, absolutely stunning. But I want to arrange the pots, but make the most of the walls, which are south-facing. What I want to grow here is a fig. But figs, it's not just about digging a hole and popping it in. What you want to do is actually contain the roots. So by doing that, you're going to just stress the plant slightly, and then hopefully that kicks it into delivering more fruit. So I've dug a hole, probably about 50 to 60 centimetres, and about the same wide. And these were slabs that were already here, to be fair, when we moved in. Just going to bring these in. So in a way, I'm making a planting box. So height-wise, I just want to be just above soil level, so you don't want the sort of any chance of the roots coming out and over. So now I've got a wonderful little sort of planting container. I'm just going to put a little bit of this rubble that I've dug out back around just to hold the paving slabs. Right, I've backfilled the hole. I'll be honest with you, this is hot. If the figs don't ripen here, they've got no chance. Now what I want to do is I'm going to wire the wall. So I'm going to grow it up against the wall, I'm going to fan it out and then tie it in as we go. What I'm going to create is some horizontal wires. First one's about 50 centimetres off the ground, and then I'll repeat that, working up the wall. And I've allowed about 70 centimetres between each eye, but that'll vary depending on what you're trying to support. So when it comes to the wire, this is about 2.5 mil galvanised wire. So what we're going to do now, really, is start to work this through the holes. This is the fun bit. Putting that along. So we just pull that through that last hole, and I've got about 10 centimetres to play with. And all I'm going to do then is start to wind it back around the wire. You might find it easier with a pair of pliers. So once that's pulled back round, then what you want to do is then go back to the other end. Now what I'm doing is tensing that wire. I'm not that worried about it being really, really tight. I mean, it is, but, you know, I could possibly pull on it and pull on it. Because what you'll find is that wire is already warm. So what will happen, as the weather changes, the wire would actually tighten itself. Like the shrubs earlier on, I'm going to water this hole well before we drop the fig in. The fig, that actually is highly recommended for outdoors. You will see mentioned a lot is brown turkey, but this, Osborne's Prolific. I'm hoping the second part of that is right. It's been recommended to me, good cropper, and a friend has said to me they taste really good frosty. So I'm hoping that they do. When it comes to planting against a wall, really, anytime, don't put anything too close, whether it's a climber, a wall shrub. You're always better off bringing it, you know, a foot away And then what we're going to do is we're just going to tilt this back in. Right, let's get this soil in. I've literally just dug it out the back garden, so I'm not putting in a lot of compost. Take the cane out. If I just tease these apart carefully, you can see as I tie them in to the wires above, I can create a beautiful fan. So hopefully in time, not only will I have beautiful figs, but as that covers that wall, those fantastic architectural leaves against that backdrop, I think will look absolutely stunning. Talking about stunning, we are now off to Carol's garden in Devon.
About 8 weeks or so ago, I started this little plot, and it is little. It's about 8 feet by 5 feet, about 1.5 by 2 metres. I just wanted to show that not only can you grow beautiful flowers, but alongside them, you can grow all sorts of wonderful produce, even in a really small space like this. Everything in here has been grown from seed, and already I'm beginning to harvest stuff. Look at that. This is a beetroot called boltardy. Boltardy just means it doesn't run to seed, it doesn't bolt. And it's my favourite beetroot. It tastes really good. And quite frankly, when you're growing vegetables, the only thing that really matters is the taste. That's what you grow them for, to eat. One of the first flowers I planted was cosmos, easy to raise from seed. It's a half-hardy annual. It's been flowering its socks off for weeks. All flowers try to set seed, but if you want to keep them flowering, it's vital to cut off their dead heads. As soon as the petals fall, I trace the stem back to the next bud and snip off just above it. If you carry on doing this regularly and keep them well fed and watered, you'll be rewarded with a glorious show of blooms right through to the first frosts. So that's it with the cosmos for now, but I shall keep on deadheading because I want them to flower. I don't want them to go to seed, but I do want this lettuce to go to seed. Unusually, I want it to flower, set seed, and I'm going to save the seed for next year. Now this is Little Gem, and I had a whole row of them through here. And we've eaten most of them. You can eat it either as a salad vegetable or you can even cook it, but only when it's young. By the time it's done this, these leaves are very, very bitter. Right, that's the last of my lettuce out apart from the one that's going to go to seed. And what I'm going to replace it with is some rainbow chard. Now this is a mixture that's called Bright Lights, for obvious reasons. The stems are lots of different colours, yellow, red, some of them are white. And the reason I want this in here is even when everything else has been taken out, it'll carry on through the winter and it's delicious. One quirky feature of rainbow chard is that the colour of the roots corresponds with the colour of the stems. I'm alternating the chard with Brompton stocks, so I'll have handsome foliage and glorious scented flowers. Several weeks ago, I sowed some basil seed directly into the ground in a big circle. And the whole idea was that eventually I was going to put a tomato in the middle of that. And there's this old saying, what goes together grows together, or the other way around. And it's great to grow basil with tomatoes. Sadly, although the seed germinated, the slugs got every single one. Now I've sown some more basil seed, but I'm afraid they're really tiny plants, so I'm going to cheat. Been to the supermarket and got a pot full of basil, but what they do when they sow this basil seed is put loads and loads of seed on the top, which means I've got a whole multitude of little separate basil plants. Well, they will be separate when I finish with them. So thumbs in, and you've got to go for it. You've got to be brave. Now, I could separate that even more, but I'm not going to. And I'm just going to plunge this whole thing into here. Of course, especially on a hot day like this, it'll need a really, really good watering. And I'm going to finish it off with a bit of grit. This will keep out any weeds, it'll retain the moisture once I've watered it, and with a bit of luck, we'll have several really established plants. Well, this little plot is abuzz with all sorts of insect action. There are bees and hoverflies, butterflies, all sorts. They particularly love the cosmos and the rudbeckia, these big open flowers. I'm sure you know that I garden organically. I wouldn't dream of using any kind of pesticides and insecticides. And so far, this plot is just about pest-free, but it's just the time of year when aphids start to move in and start gobbling up your crops. And I want to do a bit of companion planting. And the plant I'm using is tagetes. It's sometimes called French marigolds, sometimes African marigolds. It's got sort of very pungent kind of foliage, so that itself will deter some things. And one of the insects that's going to come into here and be attracted by this is the hoverfly. Hoverflies lay their eggs on the stems of different plants. Now, when those eggs hatch into larvae, they don't eat the plants because they're carnivorous. So what they're going for is aphids, and they'll gobble them up and keep your plants really clean. And this one's called harlequin. You can see why, because it's got these alternate mahogany and bright golden yellow petals. I've also planted up a container with ornamentals and edibles. There's Cosmos Purity, Amaranth and Orac. So far, everything's heading for the sky. It needs something shorter to grow over the edge, so I'm squeezing in some nasturtiums. They satisfy both criteria. Not only do they have showy flowers, but you can eat them too. Ooh, just look at that. Never mind look at them, smell them. Oh, that fragrance it's just summer personified. The sweet peas, of course. And they're one of the first things that I planted in here. I planted them up this wonderful structure and alternated them with 3 different kinds of climbing beans. Of course, the more you cut them, the more sweet peas you get. And who wouldn't want a bunch of those on the table? They're just lovely. And they're going to carry on producing those flowers all summer long. We're halfway through the season already, and yet we've got masses and masses of beautiful flowers and gorgeous produce, and there's so much more to come.
I do love that interplanting of veg and flower, but that for me is a little bit further down the road. You might see, look, I've had a bit of a rethink. The fig sits there at the back. But you know, the one plant I cannot do without is herbs. You know, I love my cooking, so I've got loads of them in containers, and I'm growing them on. And ultimately, they will make it into the garden long term. But I'm just sort of playing about. I've sort of got this really sunny side, things like the thymes and the sages. I might sort of mince and things like that, sit back in this space. There you go. I can mess about with that when I come out with a cup of tea. But I've got a couple more. A few little thymes that I bought. I just want to pot those on. And I have a mint that needs a little attention. I think first this is a lovely little lemon thyme, which is incredible, beautiful flower. But straight away, two herbs, completely different conditions. You know, my mint will love damp, even take a bit of sort of semi-shade. Whereas the thyme, you're all happy basking out in the sunshine. Yeah. So all I'm going to do is put 3 in this little pot. You know, I want this to be free draining. So my mix really is peat-free compost. I've got a little bit of topsoil in there, some horticultural sand, and then grit. So if I actually hold that together, it falls apart straight away. So you know that is going to be free draining. Put some of that in the bottom there, and then let's tease these out of here. What you'll find with thymes as well when you buy them, especially this time of year, they're normally well and truly rooted through. So I'm going to be quite brutal. Literally just going to use the back of my secateurs and just knock that down. That will really encourage that plant. Another one in there. Right, so there you go, that's the second one. So really, the key to this, you know, growing well, is me putting it in a nice sunny little spot. Yeah, keep an eye on the watering over the rest of the summer. But that drainage is key. So, really good free draining mix. And keep the plants apart. Good air circulation. And there's one little bit I'm going to do. I know, hold your breath. Take that off. That'll be used in tonight's tea. Cutting those flowers off, and now the way those plants are, water that in. That'll do it a world of good because it will concentrate on putting that root growth in, and then actually it will start to sort of restock itself from the bottom. So there we go. Now for something completely different. A lot of you grow your mints in pots. What happens is eventually your centre starts to die out. It shoots and runs, it shoots and runs. That's ultimately what it does. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut straight down through the middle of this. And then just where I can't get through there, I'm just going to take the secateurs and just cut through those. Then if we bring our pot back up, what I want now is, you think about it, I want to hold that moisture in to what I'm going to do here. So the mix I've got here has got peat-free compost, but some topsoil. So what I'm trying to do in my head is get to as close as possible to where this would be happy, you know, growing in a garden environment. So it now sits back to back in the middle. And then we're going to work in that compost in around. If you think about the compost I picked up with the thyme, now if I pick this up, give it the same squeeze, stays together. So you instantly know that is going to hold more moisture. So all I'll do with that is give it a really good soaking. Just keep it slightly sort of in the semi-shade. Keep an eye on that watering. That will soon root away. So I said I couldn't live without herbs. Well, we're now off to the West Midlands to meet Tracy West. And I'm not sure she could do without her roses.
Of course I love roses. Can you see them all around you? You call it a bit of an obsession, I would think. Some people, when they look in the garden, see how many there are. You wouldn't have this many if you didn't love them. I'm Tracy, and this is my rose garden in Birmingham. We moved into this house 26 years ago. The garden was a very mature garden. There wasn't much colour. It was quite overgrown. It was unkempt, really. Now, obviously, the garden is very, very different. It's packed to the rafters with colour. Roses everywhere, all different colours, different types, different breeders. I've always liked gardening, but probably around 2018, I started to join a few social sites, and then there was actually one person that invited me to join a site that was just for roses. I started getting more and more drawn into it. I could feel myself thinking, I think I want to go more down that route. One of the things that I love is the names of the roses and the history behind them. It always gives them a bit of interest. This rose is named Gertrude Jekyll, and she's named after a famous garden designer born in Victorian times. It's a beautiful electric pink, and it's got a lovely scent. Quite thorny, very known for her thorns, and the flowers are a lovely rosette shape. So the name of this rose is Desdemona. She's one of my favourites. She has beautiful pink buds that open up into these lovely white cup-shaped blooms. You don't have to do too much to keep a rose looking this good. The main things are really to prune in January, make sure you feed twice a year before the first and the second flush, and mulch to suppress weeds and protect the base of the plant. If you do those things, they're not that difficult. You will be rewarded in full with these beautiful blooms and this lovely glossy green foliage. So this is Floribunda rose. The name is absolutely fabulous. Very pretty rose. It's a standard, which means that it's been grafted. The trunk and the roots come from a host rose, which they call the rootstock. And then they will graft 3 shrub roses onto this stem. You can see one there, another one here, and another one there. Having 3 shrub roses grafted onto one stem does make them quite top-heavy. So it's very important to make sure that you use a good stake and a good strap to keep the head supported. The other thing is, because they have a lot of height, it means there's a lot of space underneath them, so you can underplant with companions. Here we've got oxeye daisies, geraniums, foxgloves. The lovely thing about most of these, they self-seed. I don't even have to collect the seeds on them. They just sprinkle themselves over the garden, then pop up again the next year. So this rose here is called Roald Dahl. It produces an abundance of blooms. And for those people that aren't very happy working with thorns, it is virtually thornless. You can really handle it without getting snagged or anything like that. So we decided to put potted roses in here. Yeah, so these have probably been here now about 5 or 6 years. Did our homework and looked at the size of the pots that you would need to grow roses in, and it was around 50 centimetres wide, 50 deep, for a shrub rose to survive in a pot. If the roots become congested in a small pot, very quickly the rose will tell you that it's not very happy. You'll look at it and it'll look sad and it'll start wilting. And so if you can look at them and they're saying to you, I'm happy, then you know you're doing something right. If you don't get any rainfall in summer, you probably need to water pots every other day so that you can literally almost see it coming out the bottom of the pot, and you know that it's gone all the way down to the roots. So as you're watering, try and make sure that you only water the base of the plant, because fungus can reside in the soil, and if you splash the leaves and the soil splashes back up onto the leaves, you can end up with black spots or other things that might be harbouring in the soil at the time. This is black spot on this rose. Roses are susceptible to several diseases. The most common ones are black spot, mildew and rust. Yeah, so what I tend to do is just pick the leaves off, and you find they do come off quite easily because they're already starting to die. It's a fungal disease, so you don't want to put that into your compost. You want to bin it and get rid, because if you put it into your compost, you're putting it straight back into the ground again, and it defeats the object, doesn't it, really? When we moved in here, the top part of the garden was basically a dumping ground. There was just a load of rubbish and rubble up there. So we decided to start tidying that up and put in some borders and some plants, various plants and roses and some ramblers. We had these ladders lying up here. Rather than throw them away, we could use them as climbing supports for the roses. This one is a rambler called Paul Transon. This rose is Malvern Hills, and this rose here is Gardenia, they're ramblers. They've been here about 3.5 years now, and they're just starting to get to the top of the hoops and put on quite a nice display. The hope is that these two then will mingle, so you'll get the pink and the yellow all mingling together, giving lots of colour, because that's how I like it really. I'm a bit random with my colours. I like different pops of colour all over the place. It is hard work looking after this many roses, but when they start blooming, that's payback time, and that's what you work for. I think that roses chose me. Somehow they crept into my life, and I'm glad they did.
Tracy, beautiful. Who doesn't love a rose? I'll be honest with you, I've been looking forward to doing this job all day long. All facing wall. So this stays lovely and cool. So what I want to do here really is start to cover some of the wall. And an ideal plant that I can let go up the wall is this hydrangea petiolaris. So what I've done here is I've put in topsoil with a lot of sort of well-rotted manure. And what's lovely about the hydrangea is I don't have to put wires on the wall, because it will just click. And it's not evergreen, but I really do love the structure that it creates. If you look in there closely, what I love is as it clings and then it loses its leaves in the winter, it sort of reveals this sort of skeleton, which I think looks absolutely incredible. And then you've got, as with so many other hydrangeas, beautiful flower, sort of late spring, really, early summer. Probably 15, 20 foot up there, but at the same time it could be clipped and controlled. So root system, lots of wonderful white fibrous root. Let's just loosen that all up a bit. I think if you are planting anything back against the house, I've come about a foot, so about 300 mil away. Let's just firm that in around there. Really is a lovely plant for a north-facing wall. I'll still keep an eye on it, you know, especially over the first 12, 18 months. But I'm sure that will soon get away. So, I'll give this beautiful hydrangea a drink and maybe treat myself to one. Here's a few things you could be doing at the weekend. Birds, hedgehogs and even insects need a regular supply of water, and in hot weather this is even more important. To give them a helping hand, I like to fill a shallow tray with a few rocks and stones from the garden. Place somewhere cool, out of the way, and keep topped up with water if the weather stays dry. There's still time to sow lettuce. I'm using an old metal container, but you could use anything, provided it's got a few holes in the bottom. Fill with multi-purpose peat-free compost, level off, and water. Sprinkle the seeds over the surface. I've chosen a mix of salad leaves, which are dead easy to grow. Cover with a fine layer of compost, and within a few weeks, you'll be picking your own salad, fresh from the garden. Plants in containers will be romping away now, and over the next few weeks, we'll use up a lot of nutrients. To help keep them ticking over, it's worth giving them a weekly feed. I like to use organic seaweed feed, which will give them everything they need. For the best results, apply last thing at night or first thing in the morning, wetting the roots rather than the leaves. Oh, I think this garden, I know it's early days, and at the moment I feel like I'm ultimately doing a lot of building, that early planting, but there's an incredible atmosphere in the space that, even from the first time, you know, when I arrived, it was just grass, but it felt something, and I think that is so important. And now the levels are cut, the trees are in, I'm starting to sort of add the places to be and eke more out of the atmosphere. I know it's going to be a special place. And after a good day in the garden, myself and her ladyship here, we come down here, sit on this little bucket and just have a moment. And I'm not sure life gets any better. So, I'm afraid that is it from us this week. Next week, we'll be at RHS Badminton Flower Show. Myself, Rachel and Ashley will be having a nose round. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Bye-bye. You going to say bye-bye? Look at you.